Hi folks, John Dunn here, RPG freelancer, publisher behind Meliervia. I am up here tonight at Immortals Inc. with Mikey.
Hello, John. Hello, everybody. How are you?
Doing great. Happy to be here and talk games with you.
You know, as always.
I thought we would cover something kind of horror themed tonight because, we haven't done that in a hot minute, right?
We haven't done that in such a long time that it's one of those things that I can't even remember.
Other than almost always, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, other than that. Tonight, I wanted to talk about Night Shift, Veterans of the Supernatural Wars. This is published by Elf Lair Games. And Elf Lair Games is Jason Vay's company. And this book, he worked on it with Timothy Brannon. The two of them are particularly well known for the work they've done at Eden Studios, and I think that's how they met. Eden Studios is a company that's had the license for the Buffy the Vampire Slayer role-playing game. They've done All Flesh Must Be Eaten, which is a great zombie game, and a number of other games, and these all use their house game system, which is called Unisystem.
Ooh.
And it's a system that uses a D20, but it is not the D20 system, and it is not D&D. It is very much its own thing. Very cool for doing kind of cinematic stuff, and maybe we'll talk about Unisystem at some point in the future if we end up with some Unisystem books on the shelf. This came out of a 2019 Kickstarter, and the system that they use is very much not Unisystem. The system, they call it a new system with old school mechanics, and the name that they gave it is Ogres, Old School Generic Role-Playing Engine System. And they published it under the Open Game License, the OGL. The game is a urban fantasy with monster hunters. Now, I just said a whole lot there. I say old school system. What does that mean to you, Mikey?
I'm thinking 80s D&D.
You are spot on. Yeah.
Yeah?
So, yeah.
Okay.
So OSR, old school rules, is very much 1980s D&D. There's a lot of variations with it if you're talking AD&D or basic box set D&D or any of the many iterations of revisions that have come out around it. But this game is something that's very much in that same vein. They wanted to make an OSR style game for doing modern urban fantasy, Monster Hunter type adventures, Scooby-Doo, Buffy, anything along those lines. And that's really what they have created with this.
That's probably the marketing pull, you know what I mean? The nostalgia of playing that old system.
Absolutely, yeah. And the author said, this is the system we like to use for stuff. We love the work we've done on Unisystem things, but we wanted something that harkened back to those, old school D&D days to do those same kinds of adventures. So it opens up with some introduction fiction, and then it gets right into character creation. Character creation is going to seem real familiar to old school D&D players because there's 6 attributes. Each one is scored 3 to 18. Characters pick a race. They're either human or they're supernatural. After that, you pick a class. The options they have are the Chosen One, which is basically the Slayer, an Inventor, which is kind of your tech genius, which, is the gadget guru. Your Psychic, who can either be a telekinetic or a telepathic or maybe a little bit of both. The Sage, which is kind of your archetypical occult librarian. The Survivor, which is somebody that has been a victim in the past, and that's kind of what drew them into the whole hunting monsters thing. A Theosophist, which is, you can get into word etymology there, but essentially they mean a necromancer. A Veteran, which is somebody that has formal training as a fighter. Maybe they're an ex-cop or ex-military or any variety of other combat-focused background.
They drive a pickup truck.
Well, quite possibly, yeah. And then you have Witch and Warlock, which are your spellcasting classes. In the vein of OSR, characters can also multi-class. So, you can take different combinations of those classes as suits you. After that, you pick an alignment. It's only one variety, though. So you're either aligned with law, order, or chaos. Law, neutral, or chaos, rather. There's no good evil on that spectrum. And then gear is kind of set up as an abstraction, which is a little different from your typical D&D experience, but does kind of suit the way they've set the classes up and also suits the modern setting where it's not as hard necessarily to get a hold of things because you've got credit cards, right?
Maybe,
Maybe,
tap.
Yeah,
Tap to
exactly.
pay.
Exactly. The game system is very much in the old school D&D style. Combat, saving throw check. It's all roll a d20, add a bonus or a penalty. Ultimately, your character needs a 20 plus to succeed. Class abilities are percentile, just like old school thief abilities. And then there's a rule of 2, which is kind of a luck mechanic. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail. I don't recall seeing it anywhere else before. I think it's a pretty cool setup in here, though. There are different play styles. They talk about whether you want to do gritty or realistic or cinematic, and those basically just tweak the dials and set your difficulty numbers and how dangerous things are ultimately going to be for the player characters. There is a detailed combat system broken down here, and it does include vehicles, so that's something you won't usually see in your typical D&D setting, and something that is very necessary in most modern settings. And then there's some optional systems, which include fate points, a more detailed skill system breakdown, and a great system for making your characters go insane. Because, when you see horrific things, maybe you don't deal with it particularly well. Or maybe as you deal with more and more horrific things, there are greater and greater consequences. Kind of that classic Cthulhu downward sanity spiral.
I could see that happening,
Absolutely, yeah. After that, it gets into a magic system. The magic system does very much feel like a D&D system. There are 30 pages of spell lists in here. But then there's also a really cool spell failure system for doing counter spelling, system for having magical duels. So if you've got a good guy, witch or warlock, and a bad guy, witch or warlock, they can get into a duel where they're throwing spells back and forth and countering spells back and forth. And it's a really neat mechanic. It's one of those things where I looked at it and said, this would be a lot of fun to get on the table.
Whichever you prefer.
Oh, you're killing me. There is a system of corruption from casting too many spells, and there's also a system of exorcism for when characters inevitably get possessed.
That nice little backfold. Let's go.
And, cream of mushroom soup everywhere. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There's a GM section. It's not real long. It's about 18 pages. It's basically just situational rules and ideas for adventures and campaigns. There's a little bit here on campaign planning and the world building that might go into how you want to set things up for your players. There's some notes on tweaking the rules. Again, some of that gets back to that realistic, gritty, cinematic spectrum, but there's a few other things too, and some of these are just to taste, right, for what's good for your play group. And then there is a section on advancement and how quickly you want your characters to increase in power. And again, that's going to depend upon finding the sweet spot between what kind of monsters you're throwing at them and, player enjoyment, because really any RPG players want their characters to get more powerful. After that, there's a short bestiary. It's about 15 pages. In spite of it being short, it is pretty comprehensive. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. And then after that, the game actually manages to cram 4 different settings in here, which I found really impressive. There is a post-apocalyptic setting, which is basically there was this huge supernatural war, and now everybody knows there's these supernatural creatures out there, and they're all fighting amongst themselves and against the surviving humans. There is a kitchen sink modern horror setting, which is kind of Buffy or Supernatural or really World of Darkness. Any of those you could easily do with this one. There's a neat setting that I liked called Generation Hex, which is basically a gothy, dark, horrified Hogwarts. Yeah. So magic is everywhere, and students are going to school to learn how to do their magic, and there's lots of infighting in the school.
And everyone's depressed.
Well, they gotta be, right? It's a horror setting. And then there is an ordinary world setting where supernatural creatures are just trying to blend in and act like everybody else and not be noticed.
Every day.
Every day. Explains a lot of the people we get up here, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah. After that, it talks about locations. They give you 8 example locations that could easily fit in with any of those campaign settings or anywhere else, really. They're just kind of archetypical settings that you're going to need to have players visiting as they go through a typical horror campaign. Then there's a bibliography and some conversion notes, ideas for how to use other things with this system. That's pretty much it. It's 280 pages. It is a hardcover. It's $40. And this is, again, Elf Lair Games, Jason Vey and Timothy S. Brannon. And the interior is black and white printing, but it's a pretty nice weight to the pages. Solid book. Stop in, take a look at it. If this looks like something that might be up your alley, got it on the shelf here at Immortals Inc. or available at immortalsinc.com.
Come work the night shift. See you guys later.
Till next time, good gaming.